Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this very informative hearing. Thank you all for your service. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate you, General Call. I'll mention in C-130, as you know, we have a lot of great ones in Little Rock in my district. General Bolger, I wanted to ask you, when you're dealing with the transition from a strategic reserve to operational reserve, can you talk a little bit about how you're going to balance the Guard's role in the states? That's particularly important in a state like Arkansas, where we have a lot of tornadoes and storms and things like that. And I know that they will continue to respond to civil incidents like that. But if you could provide a little guidance, I'm particularly interested in the training balance and how they accommodate that in light of a shift to an operational reserve.
Sir, that's a great question, and I think it comes down to the fundamental nature of the Guard having arisen out of the militia tradition in the United States, always ready for home service, and then, like the old Minutemen, and then deploying overseas when necessary. Our Guard in particular, and our Reserve too, have done a great job in that for the last decade for the Army. You mentioned the term operational. Old days, the Guard really and the Reserve were a strategic reserve. They were the force we called on when things really got big, and maybe in the Cold War when we were looking at a major World War III type scale of conflict. So now we use about 70,000 Guardsmen and Reservists on active duty today, every day, really, keeping them on active duty, a good number deployed overseas. And so how do we balance that with the Governor's needs and expectations that their Guard would be available in the event of a state emergency or a natural disaster? Two things we've done that I think are helping us in that area, sir. The first is trying to get the Guard and Reserve, the Guard in particular for state duty, on a predictable schedule of deployment, which is to say about 4 years at home for every year deployed. If a governor knew that he or she would have that Guard available for 4 years out of 5, then they know at least that 80% of the time is covered with a trained, ready unit that knows the state and that lives there and is ready to go. And I think our Guard has done really, really well on these homeland tests. And then what about the year where they're going to get mobilized, deploy overseas? I think this brings us to the second point. Secretary McHugh and General Casey actually commissioned a study led by General Dennis Reimer, one of our former Armored Chiefs of Staff. Lieutenant General Roger Schultz, Lieutenant General Helmley helped them out with this. They were key leaders in the Guard and Reserve. And they came back and they said, we need to look at a way to create more of a total force for homeland missions as well. Maybe we can see a future with some changes to how we task organize, where the governor, he or she might have available, if their Guard brigade was deployed, they could have Army Reserve forces resident in that state, which are federal forces in reserve. They could have active Army units resident in that state. And all that would come together. And so, of course, we've had some great and hard-won lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina, from Hurricanes Gustav and Ike, from flooding as recently as this month in the United States, where we're seeing some opportunities there to really get a better homeland force. And so I would underscore that in the direction we've received from the President and the Secretary of Defense, Homeland Defense is the #1 responsibility of the Department of Defense. And normally our forces are not doing that every day, but they're all available. And should an event occur in the homeland, just as we saw after 9/11, everything will head that direction until that event is dealt with, sir.
Sure. I got in the Reserve in 1996. I'm still in the Reserve now. And I can tell you there's a clear difference between the 1996 Strategic Reserve and the operational now, and particularly in terms of readiness. We call this Readiness Subcommittee. I don't think I'd ever heard the word readiness until post 9/11 in the Reserve, and everything changed. So I know exactly what you're talking about there. I want to ask you about an issue that is more about, it's about personnel, not equipment, and that's OERs, officer evaluations. To some extent, NC OERs as well for non-commissioned officers, but I'm particularly interested in our leaders and how they are rated. I am waiting on an OER now as I'm leaving my reserve unit. So I have written and rated folks. So I am intimately familiar with OERs, and There was a great article in the Atlantic magazine about a month ago, and it talked about John Noggle and a bunch of the really sharp military leaders who have gotten out of the Army. And I know that we have taken steps, particularly in the last decade or 5 years, to be more innovative, to encourage the cliche outside the box thinking. I saw that firsthand when I went to Fort Dix to Phase 1 of ILE. Instead of a lecture format where you just sit, take notes, and listen to an officer, you sit in a sort of a horseshoe. You're given all these hypotheticals. You're encouraged to think and to dialogue, and it's really, it was actually surprising to me to see that kind of freedom in thinking and in structure in the military, and I was encouraged by it because I thought that it was teaching folks how to think instead of how to memorize some things that they would probably soon forget. So I know that y'all have, that there's been an evolution. I know we're making progress, but I think the way that people are rated, and I'm just sort of laying this predicate so you can comment on it. I think the way people are rated and then the way they're assigned is of concern to me. The Atlantic article mentioned that first of all, as I've seen on the OER side, you see just all sorts of inflation where no one gets any negative comments, because a negative comment, God forbid, completely ruins their career. So you get at least good things said about you, and then if you did a really good job, you get extraordinary things said about you. But if nothing bad, because then your career's dead, particularly as an officer, particularly as a field grade officer. So the artificiality of the OER process is a concern to me. On the assignment side, what concerns me is, and the Atlantic article, I commend it to you if you haven't read it, but it talks about the fact that commanders don't have the ability to develop relationships with individual soldiers and seek those individual soldiers out on a routine basis for assignment. You get to know a soldier, you see that they are well suited for this position or that position. You seek them out and say, this is the one I want. Now, there may be some of that at your level. You probably have the ability to get whoever you want working for you. But down particularly at the company grade level and moving into the field grade level, those assignments sometimes seem random. They don't seem connected with the history of the individuals involved. And so I would just ask if you could to comment on that, and I'd welcome anybody's comments on this, because I think that this is, a lot of these leaders in the Army go on to lead in the civilian world. Sometimes, though, we lose them too soon from the military, and they get out, not because they're ready to get out and they've had a fulfilling career, but many times they're ready to get out because they're frustrated with the system. And if you would address that, sorry for the long question, but if you would address that, I'd appreciate it.
No, sir, I think it's actually a very fundamental question, because the military is all about people. And our goal really, as you know, is when anybody joins the Army, we see every soldier, every private as a potential leader. And whether they stay in and become non-commissioned officers or warrant officers or commissioned officers, or whether they do their time and get out with an honorable discharge and go to civil life, in any case, we think we have some leader development responsibilities to everyone, and we really do. So even in our basic training, even in our very low-level training, there's some of those folks who get leadership responsibilities, and we encourage that, because as we've seen over and over in the current fight, it really is a couple of privates first class or a young sergeant who are often having to make some very, very critical decisions that can have strategic implications. You mentioned our evaluation, our officer evaluation. The current one's been around for about over 20 years, and we're about due to relook it. In fact, General Casey has directed that we come back with some options on some changes we may need to make, and maybe expand the way we do evaluations. At least for the Army, we're still pretty traditional in the sense that you're evaluated by your chain of command, your immediate commander, and then one commander one level up. There's some thought that maybe you need to get some peer feedback involved in that. There's some thought that maybe we need to hear from subordinates. You know, get a what would be called an industry, a 360-degree view. Now, how you do that in a hierarchical organization with a uniform code of military justice, we'd have to work our way through that. But I think we've got an innovative enough force so we can come up with some options there, sir. And since you've got some views on that, I'll take back to our task force to come see you, because you've got some unique perspectives where you're at now. And sort of the final comment had to do sort of with, for want of a better term, what makes a young person stay in the military? And the answer is unique to every man and woman, but I think for the people who reach that crossroad when they decide to stay in or get out, it really has to do with one thing. Am I making a difference? Does the Army think that what I'm doing is doing something? I think some people think it's because of money or because of rank or because of getting an award. I don't think that's it. I think folks, they come in and they swear in front of the American flag, and they know it's an important task they do when they put on a uniform, and they want to make that contribution. And I think it's incumbent on us in our leader development to give them that opportunity to use their talents, sir.
General, thank you for that, and we thank the gentleman from Arkansas for his service.